Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Noble Father podcast. My name is Theophilus. Today is June the 10th of 2024, and if you're here for the first time, I am your host. And this podcast is really about things that are going on in my life. My journey through fatherhood, and this is the thing I always preface in all my episodes: is that I am the least person to be talking on a podcast about being a good father, being a noble father. I am just as bad and I'm not just as I'm learning every single day. I am just as imperfect as the next person, and really this episode, from last week till now, maybe you say the creative juices aren't flowing, and it's a bit of a struggle to figure out what ultimately to talk about. A lot of my episodes, I pray before and I ask God, hey, what is it you want me to talk about today? And today I really just want to convict you all, whoever's listening. And you may be a mother who's listening to this, and not a father. The same could be asked of you. And I really just want to pose one question: is what kind of legacy? What legacy are you leaving behind for your children? Like, what will your children remember you for? This is a big deal for me, obviously, right? Trying to think about that for my kids, as every action that I take every single day impacts my children. I'm very. You hear me talk about being present all the time on here, and being intentional, and my wife will tell you, a lot of times I'm not very present. And, as a life of an entrepreneur is one that is very difficult, and by no means am I making any excuses for life, but I'm just as imperfect as the next person. And, how did this podcast topic come about today? When I start my days, I like to really take some time to be quiet and, go into my quiet time with the Bible. And so I like to do like my daily Proverbs. What that means is, there's 31 chapters in Proverbs, and that's enough for every single day of the month. And so because today is June the 10th, I open up Proverbs 10 and I go to read it. And sometimes I also open up like our daily bread. If you don't know what our daily bread is, I recommend you to Google it. It's a kind of like a short little devotional. Every single day there's a story attached to it. And in today's story, today's daily bread talked about a pastor by the name of John Harper, and that's what led to this conversation of what is your legacy going to be? Because John Harper's story is one that is just absolutely incredible. And just selfless, because you'll also hear me say on this podcast a lot that we are physical beings living a spiritual life, and because we are spiritual beings living a physical life, and because that is true, that means that there is an eternity. There's a spiritual eternity, and if we get that wrong, right? And we have a lot of examples, a lot of role models in today's society who live like we are physical beings living a spiritual life, emphasizing things that are, inconsequential. Material is of this physical world. Possessions, what do you say, like prestige, popularity, money, right? It's all superficial. And it goes so much deeper, right? We have morals, we have our spirit, we have our soul. And so we don't have a lot of examples of people who understand that we are living a physical life and we are actually spiritual. What's crazy about this is, I've been on this journey for 2 years now. 2 years, 1 month, and 29 days. I looked it up. Very first episode was April 12th, 2022. And that was 2 years ago. A bit of an update on the statistics of the podcast. We're at a little over 5,700 listens. And there's 115 episodes, and I did the math on it. It equates to about exactly almost 50 listens per episode, 183 followers, and yeah, I consider that a success. Has the podcast helped even one person? Yes, absolutely. And I think that in itself is a success already. And so, even just looking at your accomplishments, looking at things that you've achieved, if you're looking at it through the lens of a physical, if your belief is that you are a physical being living in a spiritual life, and you look at that success and the world would tell you, and the world being that this life is a physical life and is a physical being living a spiritual life, then you are a failure, right? Because the entrepreneur, the successful entrepreneur who is of that similar mindset would say that, well, you're not making money. How much money has your podcast brought in? In reality, zero. It has brought in $0 for me. And they would say automatically, well, then you're way in the negative. You spent so much time on these episodes, and you've made $0. That means that you are an absolute failure. I say these things, because that weighs heavily on me as well, right? I have a family to provide, and there's things that I want to do and things I want to get for my family that I can't, and I can't afford to do that. But whenever I view my success from the lens of we are spiritual beings living a physical life, that completely flips it upside down. I look at my results and think, what is the eternal reward? What is the eternal payoff on things like this? I don't know if my podcast has ever impacted somebody. I don't know fully, actually. This is something that God never reveals to us. Some of us are are called to just plant the seed, and once the seed is planted, maybe somebody else comes to nurture it. Maybe somebody else comes to water it, and we must be okay with that. The same could be said about my time spent in China. The university students that I taught English to at one point. Who knows what their lives, where they are now in life, what they're doing right now. The seed was planted, and I don't get to see the harvest. I must be okay with that. So with the podcast as well. And, I've had people who have had their lives changed as a result of the podcast, changed dramatically. This is generational impact. This is eternal impact that this podcast is having on other people. And so if I view my podcast and the work that I'm doing through Noble Father through that lens, man, I am a raving success, right? God gets the glory for these things. God brought this all about. He created me. He brought my family through history to bring me to this point right now, speaking into this episode, for you to listen to it right now. God gets the glory. God gets the glory for everything that you're hearing here right now. And so let's circle back. Pastor John Harper. His story is one in which that it makes me, from a father's perspective, just unbelievable. And so let me just tell the story. John Harper was a pastor, and he was from Ireland, Scotland originally. He was an evangelist. So he was on a journey. So he was in Scotland, and he went to Chicago or New York to go to do evangelism. And so, to return back, brought, he was on this trip with his daughter and his sister. And so as he's, and so he is making this journey from New York back to Scotland. And if you don't know already, that was, in early 1900s, was on the Titanic. And John is somebody, as described by people who knew him, as somebody who was really adamant and very on fire for God, but not just for God, but also for those lost souls, people who didn't know who God was. And so when the Titanic hit the iceberg, everybody was thrown into a frantic you know, um, drive for survival, right? Everybody's survival instinct started to kick in. And if you watch the movie, you see that people are losing their minds. What's crazy about that is, from the depiction of the movie, you'll see like there's cars on the boat, there's people's possessions, right? People were wearing very flashy jewelry, their most beautiful clothes, their most amazing everything that the people had, all their wealth and all their luxuries and everything was all on this boat. And as soon as it hit this iceberg, those people didn't think about their possessions. They all just went into survival mode, right? In the movie, you'd see people who are, hands clasped, right, praying for, that they'll come out of this. I don't know if you've ever seen videos of people like on a plane. There's a video of this lady on a plane, like people on a plane, and the airplane turbulence gets crazy, and the person, the flight attendant is serving water and drinks and food, and all of a sudden the thing rocks and all the juice comes out and lands on this lady who's in the shot of the frame, and you can see she's just losing it. She's just like, praying, right, that she survives. Like she doesn't even realize that she's covered in juice, and she's just doing everything in her power to just like to think about, like, pray that I get out of this like survival mode now. So as this is happening, John Harper obviously is in control, has to take care of his daughter and his sister. And what does he do, right? He puts them ensures that they are on a lifeboat, so they're on a lifeboat. And of course, John Harper doesn't make it onto a lifeboat, right? There's not enough room for men as well. So only women and children, elderly, get onto lifeboats. And so from people's eyewitness accounts is that John Harper was in the water, of course. But rather than trying to survive, stay afloat, or, dude, like I do cold plunging, right? I do cold dips, right? So I sit in cold water. I can only imagine somebody who's never done cold plunging now sitting in frigid waters where there's icebergs, okay? It's freezing. One of the things I don't recommend in cold plunging is just jumping straight into the water and trying to like tread water, because not only are you not regulating your breathing, but also it's so cold that it can shock the body. And when your body's not getting enough oxygen, it's very easy for your muscles to tense up. And when your body doesn't get oxygen, it doesn't move, doesn't survive. There's no way to move around. John's last moments, from eyewitness accounts, is that he swam from person to person, asking them if they had been saved yet, if they knew who Jesus was. And he would. There's a verse that he would ask, actually. Acts 6:31. Asked them, "Hey, are you saved?" And anybody who said no, he replied to them, "Believe in the Lord Jesus Christ, and thou shalt be saved." Acts 16:31. And he used his dying moments, his dying breath, to go ensure the spiritual eternity of those who are around him. No idea how many people he's saved. Interesting, addition to that story is that there was a 100-year, and there was a reunion of, because the church that he was heading back towards in Scotland is called the Moody Church. And the Moody Church has a hall named after him. It's called the Harper Hall. And there was a reunion. I think there was an anniversary. And, there's a man who said that he was John Harper's last convert, which is amazing, right? Is that this eternal legacy of this man's story, that in the dying moments of his physical life, he was out helping others in their spiritual life. And how quickly we how many others would just tread water, survive, do everything they can to survive, whereas this man, certain, this father, certain of his eternal existence, leaving behind his daughter and his sister on a lifeboat, neglecting all physical material possessions. Even this is wild, because even as I'm recording this, this is something crazy to think about as a father, right? The podcast name is Noble Father. And I'm just picturing, and here's more context, is that Harper's daughter was 6 years old. 6 years old. My daughter's 6. And so you can imagine, because spiritual beings living a physical life. My daughter, my son, are physical things. Yes, they are spiritual beings as well. And I'm not saying they're not important. But in that moment, for John Harper to put his 6-year-old daughter and his sister on a lifeboat and then proceed to save his fellow men and women who are at the verge of death, on the edge of death, near certain death, to rescue people spiritually as they say goodbye to this physical life. That's not, it boggles my mind. It blows my mind. And so, that got me thinking about legacy. Like, what is the point of your existence? What are you living for? What are you going to be remembered for? What will be your dying legacy? Like, what would you hold, right? And, this is interesting. Last week, right, I talked about help. And, I'd been sharing my heart about this podcast, about the group, and how difficult it's been. It's one of those things. Society will magnify the things that are inconsequential. There's a reason why we hear more about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce together, right? Two of the probably worst role models that you could, ever, magnify. I'm not saying that Taylor Swift hasn't done anything good for charity or what have you. Yeah, they have. But I think there's something more sinister behind their existence than we know. And, they are magnified in society, whereas, people who are, actually out there doing the dirty work, aren't magnified, right? And so you can think about from a business perspective, well, what thrives, right? Oh, rappers and, OnlyFans, people with OnlyFans accounts and, doing those, those kind of things is magnified, gaming, right? Video game streamers and it's all inconsequential stuff that gets all the biggest publicity, right? And we don't think about it from an eternal perspective, right? If we think about it from an eternal perspective, like that should impact the way we act and the way we live our lives. Again, I'm not the perfect person to tell you this. Like, I'm doing the best that I can as well, right? Noble Father is an example of that, of me trying to do my best there, of trying to serve fathers at the same time making it profitable so that I can take care of my family and one day for me to take care of the other fathers in the group. And so, where is my name etched, right? Do I want a Hollywood star? The world will tell you, if you have a Hollywood star, you are a success. That is your legacy. You are this concrete star, in the, Hollywood Boulevard. I think that's where it is. The Walk of Fame or whatever it's called. Right. They would tell you that that is a success. In reality, that's nothing. You're never going to be remembered. America's only 250 years old. Like, you're not going to be remembered beyond that. Just doesn't matter if you have a star on a road. You're just, in the grand scheme of eternity, it will not be remembered. And so, as I was going through that, those last 2 weeks of difficulty, even up till now, I'm still feeling the repercussions of it. I'm reminded of a poem, and it's a poem that always gets me. And you'll hear a variation of this from Jim Caviezel, right? The guy from Sound of Freedom. He also did the depiction of Jesus in The Passion of the Christ. It's an amazing poem, and it's one that I want to close with, close this episode with, because it hits home for me, and is what I want my legacy to be about. This is what I want my children to see, and I think that part of it, I do feel like I am a success. When my son prays for our food, when we dine together, he prays for Noble Father. He prays for the dads in my group, and he prays for the success of the community. And I think already in his mind that is Daddy's legacy. That is what Daddy is doing. How much of that is beyond just the physical aspect of bringing fathers together, but actually wanting the spiritual reassurance, the eternal reassurance that they know who God is and what God's love means. And so I'm going to read this poem, and I'm going to close with it. And I just wanted to say thank you for tuning into this episode. I very much appreciate all your support. As minuscule as it may be, I may not be getting 50,000 listens, on a single episode, and I'm okay with that. Something that I'm reconciling, and if one day this does provide for my family abundantly, it'd be amazing. But if it doesn't, I'm okay with that as well. God, I'm subject to God's timing, and I know that He will provide and take care of us. I might be reiterating some stuff from the last episode, but here's the poem. Thank you for joining me. Your name may not appear down here in this world's hall of fame. In fact, you may be so unknown that no one knows your name. This hall of fame is only good as long as time shall be, but keep in mind God's hall of fame is for eternity. To have your name inscribed up there is greater, yes, by far, than all the halls of fame down here and every man-made star. The crowds on earth, they soon forget the heroes of the past. They cheer like mad until you fall, and that's how long you last. But God, He never does forget, and in His hall of fame, by just believing in His Son inscribed, you'll find your name. I tell you, friend, I wouldn't trade my name, however small, that's written there beyond the stars in that celestial hall, for every famous name on earth or glory that they share. I'd rather be an unknown here and have my name up there.